Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you but not from you, and though they are with you yet, they belong not to you. You may give them your love but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. This is a famous quote by Kahlil Gibran. Most people believe that children belong to them, that because they gave birth, because they sacrificed sleep, time, and energy, because they worried and loved and struggled, that their children are in some way an extension of themselves. And this belief feels so natural that we rarely question it. And yet there is an ancient truth whispered quietly through time. A truth expressed so simply and so beautifully when it says that your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself, because life does not move forward through ownership. It moves forward through expression. And every child is not a possession but a continuation, not a project but a mystery, not something you shape according to your fears, dreams, and unfinished stories, but something that arrives through you, not from you, much like a river flowing through a valley, shaped by the land but never owned by it. You can see this truth quietly unfolding in everyday life when a parent tries to live again through a child, pushing them toward the career they never had, the success they never reached, the respect they never received, believing unconsciously that if the child achieves it, then somehow the parent will finally feel complete. And yet the child often resists, not because they are ungrateful, but because the soul knows when it is being asked to carry a burden that does not belong to it. And this resistance, this rebellion, this distance that sometimes grows between parent and child is not a failure of love, but a call for freedom. A reminder that life cannot be inherited like furniture or values like rules, because life must be discovered from the inside, not imposed from the outside. This is why Gibran says they come through you but not from you. Because biologically, yes, the body comes through the parent, but consciousness, curiosity, temperament, destiny, and longing arise from something far larger than any individual family, something woven into existence itself. And this is why two children raised in the same home can become completely different people. One gentle, one fierce, one quiet, one questioning. Not because parenting failed or succeeded, but because each soul carries its own rhythm, its own question, its own journey into being. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts. And this is perhaps one of the hardest truths to accept, because love feels generous while thoughts feel protective. And we believe that if we teach children how to think, what to believe, what to fear, and what to avoid, we are keeping them safe. And yet what often happens is that our thoughts are not pure wisdom, but conditioned fears, cultural anxieties, generational wounds, and unfinished grief disguised as advice. And when these are handed down unquestioned, children inherit not clarity but confusion, not guidance but pressure. And slowly they learn not how to listen to life, but how to obey expectation. Think of how often adults say, "I just want my child to be safe." And behind those words hides 1,000 unspoken fears. Fear of poverty, failure, rejection, loneliness. And so safety becomes conformity, and conformity becomes obedience, and obedience becomes distance from self. And years later, that same child, now grown, sits in an office, in a relationship, or in a life that looks acceptable from the outside, but feels empty inside, wondering quietly, "How did I get here?" Without realizing that they learned very early how to silence their own inner voice in order to survive love. You may house their bodies but not their souls, because the soul does not live in yesterday or tomorrow. It lives in a place beyond your reach, a place you cannot enter even in your dreams. And this does not mean parents are unimportant. It means they are sacred in a different way. Not as sculptors of destiny, but as gardeners who prepare soil without deciding how the flower must grow, because no gardener pulls on a plant to make it taller, and no amount of control can replace sunlight, patience, and trust. We see this tension play out daily when parents panic as children grow independent, when opinions differ, when values shift, when distance appears, and rather than seeing this as life unfolding, it is experienced as betrayal, as loss, as disrespect. Because ownership was mistaken for love, and letting go feels like abandonment, when in truth it is the highest form of care, because love that cannot release eventually suffocates, and protection that cannot trust eventually becomes a cage. This teaching does not say love less, it says love differently. Love without possession, guide without control, care without fear, because fear is what turns love rigid, and rigid love breaks easily, while flexible love bends and endures. And perhaps the deepest wisdom here is not only about children, but about all relationships. Because how often do we treat partners, friends, or even ourselves as property, demanding that they remain consistent with who we once needed them to be, rather than allowing them to evolve into who life is asking them to become? And when they change, we say they are no longer the same, not realizing that change is the only sign of life itself. In daily life, this appears when a parent cannot accept a child's new beliefs, a new way of loving, a new way of seeing the world, and rather than listening with curiosity, responds with fear disguised as disappointment. And slowly conversation becomes avoidance, connection becomes politeness, and love becomes conditional silence. Not because affection disappeared, but because freedom was never made room for. Alan Watts often spoke of the universe as a process rather than a collection of things, and children are not things either. They are processes, unfolding expressions of the same mystery that moves stars, seasons, and breath. And when we remember this, parenting becomes less about control and more about companionship, less about molding and more about witnessing, less about producing outcomes and more about being present as life reveals itself through another being. The tragedy is not that parents influence children. Influence is inevitable. The tragedy is when influence becomes imprisonment, when guidance becomes domination, and when love becomes fear wearing a mask, because fear always wants guarantees, and life never gives them. And so perhaps the invitation hidden in this passage is not just for parents, but for all of us who were once children and still carry the echoes of expectations that were never ours, still trying to live lives approved by ghosts, still apologizing for becoming who we are, still asking for permission long after no one is watching, and realizing that freedom is not rebellion against parents, but forgiveness. Forgiveness of their limitations, forgiveness of our own confusion, and acceptance that everyone was doing the best they could with the awareness they had at the time. When you truly understand that your parents were not authors of your soul, but participants in your arrival, something softens inside, resentment loosens its grip, and responsibility returns to where it belongs. Not as blame, but as ownership of your own becoming, because life did not end with childhood, it only began there. And now the task is not to fulfill inherited dreams, but to listen carefully to the quiet longing that belongs uniquely to you. This is why Gibran's words endure, because they do not attack parents, they liberate them, and they do not diminish children, they dignify them, and in doing so they remind us that life is not something we possess, but something that passes through us briefly, asking only that we care without controlling, love without grasping, and guide without fear. And when we do, something miraculous happens. Not that children become who we want them to be, but that relationships remain alive, honest, and real, and life continues its dance unbroken, generation after generation, not owned, not trapped, but free. Thank you, and please subscribe for more.